Hello and welcome to this episode of Tripology. I'm Alun and I'm here with the ever supportive Adam.
Alan, how are you doing, mate? Because the audience won't be privy to this, but we've had some technical difficulties this morning, haven't we?
We have, and you've been ever supportive because I'm having a meltdown. I'm staying at a beach hostel, which sounds nice. Oh, it's amazing. The sun's out, the sand's out, the people are out. But all those three things, unfortunately, create a cacophonous ability to disrupt a podcast recording. There are birds chirping, there are people milling, there's Wi-Fi trouble. It's been a hell of a situation getting this show on the road, but hopefully the result is something that we can all be happy with.
Well, we'll find out on Saturday, won't we? It's so funny that you've got so much to contend with where you are. And, I've even gone to the measures of taking the clock off of the wall just to make sure that the microphone doesn't pick up a ticking sound. Yet you've got, dogs and birds and sand running around in the background, making all sorts of noise. So, mate, as always, we do the best we can. And this is what Tripology is about. You can't have it perfect all the time, just like you can't have travel perfect all the time.
Yeah, people go, oh, I do a travel podcast and then check into a studio. That's not how it works, man. I can literally hear someone taking a shower behind me. So we're nothing if not authentic here on Tripology.
Shall I put the clock back on the wall?
Yeah, pop that clock back. Let's hear the ticking. Let it motivate us to a brand new tomorrow. Adam, goodness me, it's crazy. Can you hear all that, mate?
Definitely, yeah. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. It gives atmosphere, a sense of place.
Yeah. Christ. Adam, you're someone who has had to put up with, to listen to me talking about all these escapades in the Himalayas, in Nepal, in India, now in Sri Lanka where I am, and certainly I'm going to share those stories with the audience. But I wanted to take this opportunity this week to talk a little bit about you, because you've undergone one of the quintessential travel experiences this week, one of the things that binds all long-term travellers together, and that is sojourning back home after a very long time on the road.
Yeah, it's such a great thing to talk about, how I'm feeling, because it's incredibly fresh, very raw, and it's something that you've been through in a similar fashion, I think, having been away from home for such a long time. I mean, as we said on previous episodes, you were travelling for a lot of that, whereas I've been, living. I've got my sort of routine and a friendship group and a job and a house and all that kind of thing that I've kind of been dismantling over the last few weeks. And it's been an emotional roller coaster, to be honest with you, and I don't think it's quite caught up with me yet.
Yeah, amazing. I was travelling for 4 years. We talked about it on the podcast. I went home, I surprised my family, and that was a very vivid experience which will stick with me for the rest of my life. So I'm really interested in everything that you're feeling, experiencing, thinking over these last kind of 24 hours when you've been home.
So, yeah, let's just walk through it step by step. I left Kelowna, which is the airport that I picked you up from. You'll know it well, but it's the capital of the interior of BC. And I left it was sort of 10:15 in the morning, but it was a complete whiteout, mate. I mean, the weather could not be more different. It was heavy snowfall and not the sort of conditions that fill you with confidence as a passenger in a light aircraft, I'll be honest. And then we landed in Calgary about an hour or so later, and then I had an 8.5 hour layover in Calgary. I probably should have got your advice, actually, on what to do on a long layover.
Yeah, do you like long layovers intuitively, or do you find them to be a very horrible, boring, uncomfortable affair? I quite like them.
Yeah, I think it will become whatever you make it, right? Assuming you're able to leave the airport and sort of jaunt around the local town or city, I think it's absolutely fine. I was actually quite fortunate in that I had my carry-on bag and then I had a little day sack as well with all the valuables in. And then the lady announced over the tannoy, just as we were checking in for the first flight, that there wasn't enough room on the plane to store all of the hand luggage in the, stowed away in the compartments and things. So would anyone like to check their luggage in for free and it will make it to the final destination? And I thought, yeah, because that means that I've got, 8.5 hours in Calgary where I don't have to lug my backpack around. So I did that and took advantage of that opportunity, which was great. That kind of freed me up. And then for the layover in Calgary, I did venture into the city. So I took a bus into the city there and back. Took about 40 minutes each way. And then I was in the city for, I don't know, probably about 4 hours walking around, having some food and stuff. But it was -6. You know what it gets like in the Albertan winter, Al. It's not exactly conducive to going for a walk around. But no, I loved it. I think price often comes into it as well, isn't it? It's not really fair to say, that I'm against long layovers. If you're going to save a couple of $100, then why not?
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a few people message me after that 82-hour layover episode back when I was travelling from Morocco to Belize. We had a lot of people message and say like, "Oh, you should have ventured out in Venice. You should have gone and had an explore." But I'm actually the king of the do nothing layover. I'm the king of getting work done on my laptop or just sitting and having a coffee for 8 hours, staring into my own soul. So I'm a big fan of layovers, but I think sometimes I just leave it in the airport.
Yeah, I like that. You can often get a strong Wi-Fi connection and get some work done and just be, I think, sort of open and receptive to the atmosphere that you're in. And that's something that I wasn't used to or haven't been used to for a long time, is just sitting in an airport. And I find them quite positive, busy environments. I love the fact that everyone's got a different story to tell. I would love to actually do sort of airport interviews at one point with you, Al, and just see where people are going,
They're labyrinths. They're places that exist outside of time. Always, everyone going somewhere, but as yet to reach their destination. I think there's a philosophical beauty about airports. And people will go, "Alun, you're a traveller, why don't you just leave the airport? You can see something." I don't think you can see nothing in 8 hours, really, oftentimes. So it would have to be, for me, a layover would have to be over 12 hours for me to think about leaving the airport. That's just my own personal preference, but for even a brief one, I like to just hang out, chill in the airport, be productive.
Yeah, well, I did take a note out of your book being the operative word, because I also started journaling for the first time in that airport.
Nice. Would you like to share something you've written?
Maybe on later episodes, because my journal's not sitting next to me at the moment, but I certainly will. And okay. I thought about you a lot when I was writing, because I didn't know who I was writing for. It was quite strange. Words were just coming out, but I thought, is this me talking to me, or is it
me talking to Alun?
Yeah, is it me talking to Alun? Is it me just talking or writing, but imagining reading it to someone later on? It's the frame of mind and the style will come out in, I guess, later. As time goes by, you sort of find out how you write or what you tend to write about. But it was very honest. I mean, it was maybe a diet or light edition of the kind of emotions I've been feeling. I'm maybe not ready to put pen to paper for those just yet, but I think it's going to be a good thing. I think it's going to be very valuable.
I think it's an amazing way to get your thoughts down on paper, and you will be feeling a lot of things. So let's get into that a little bit, because seeing your family for the first time, after how long is it now since you've seen your family?
So I arrived in Canada November 2020, so yeah, 3 years and 3 months, give or take.
And little ones will have grown old in that time, parents will have aged, people will have left jobs, moved on from jobs, had philosophical awakenings, converted to Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, or a number of different religions. Lots of things happen in the time that we spend away. So was there trepidation, excitement? What kind of things are you feeling?
I was quite sort of nervous and excited. I guess just to finish off the journey, after Calgary, we then did Calgary, London, Heathrow, landing in London just yesterday afternoon, about 1 p.m. And just to hear other people's voices on the train with similar accents to me gave me so much pleasure.
An anglophonic delight.
Yeah, it was... I don't know, I really, really liked it. One thing I will say, Al, is that I've noticed that I am in a significantly better mood than most of the people I've interacted with.
That's the old Canadian positivity seeping into your DNA.
Yeah, it's amazing that that's the first place your head went, because, of course, I've also been through an incredibly emotional time over the last few months, and then also I'm incredibly excited, completely elated about the prospect of seeing my family, my mum, my dad, my step-parents, and then my sister and her children, of course. So that could be why I'm also in a very good mood. But I think you're right. That's what I thought to myself, is when I was buying something in a shop, I was asking about how their day was, and I was all sort of chipper and, okay, all right, great, thanks so much for that. Yeah, brilliant. By the way, you've got fantastic teeth. And just being very complimentary and things, and people are looking at me like, is this guy on drugs, though?
Yeah, people aren't used to that in the UK, are they? That's Canadian sincerity. So, I mean, enjoy it. It will last for a brief amount of time, I imagine, before it's battered out of you by English skepticism.
That's it. Yeah, no, that was definitely something that I noticed for sure, and I suppose it kind of rings true. It's easy to understand why. And then aside from that, mate, I've just been trying to spend quality time. I mean, I've not even been here a day yet, so I've spent a lot of time with my mum and stepdad, and my sister and her husband and their children came around for dinner last night, which was amazing because when I left, my nephews were 1 and 3, and now they're 6 and 4, and they're not just talking, they're chatty, which is, it's just so amazing to be around them. And as soon as I opened the door, they ran through, they gave me a big hug and said, "Uncle Adam, you're back." And it's just, it's enough to make your heart melt.
But you've had interactions with them over online video and stuff, so they've been able to watch you as you've gone through your Canadian adventure. It's not like now they've suddenly seen someone who they don't recognise.
No, I think that my sister makes a point of talking about me all the time, and also when we're on the phone together on FaceTime, she'll introduce me to the boys and whatever they're doing. Usually they're sort of colouring or they're watching a film and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's they certainly know who I am, but I still feel as their uncle that I've not been in their life anywhere near enough, so I need to change that.
Yeah, well, you are changing it, aren't you? I think that's a cool little topic to touch on very briefly, is like this idea that I think a lot of people are nervous about travelling for that reason. Like, oh, I won't be in the lives of the people that I love very much anymore. Will my nephews and nieces remember me? Will my own kids be upset at me for abandoning them and going travelling on the road? No, but I think that oftentimes the online world can make that whole thing feel so much smaller, so much tinier. It's very, very easy to stay in touch, at least enough that when you go home, it's not like a complete separation. You're still in their lives to a point where they can run and be happy to see you.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on the relationship you have with people, all right? So, I mean, it's not that difficult, I don't think, to carve out 10, 15 minutes in a day when you're travelling to just check in with people. And I've been able to do that. Maybe it's slightly easier for me because I was living there. So I kind of built my routine at the weekend around speaking to family and friends at the weekend. But then, we've been sort of up to date with what we've been doing the entire time. So when I came home, we just sank right back into the same routine, sitting around the table, having the same sorts of chats. And I don't know, it was so lovely. And I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. So I will be here for the next few weeks, I guess. And then we'll just see where life takes me.
Yeah, cool, man. I know that when I was flying home from Brazil. I was with Wagner in Brazil when I decided to fly home for the first time after a long time being away, and I was incredibly nervous. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but I felt like I developed and evolved so much as a person that I didn't really know how it fit into my life back home. I was nervous to see my family again. I chose to surprise them. It was kind of, in many ways, a really positive thing. I'll always remember the hug my dad gave me when I walked through the door. I'll always remember the look on my mum's face when she saw me for the first time. I'll always remember aspects about it, but in some ways, it wasn't really the right time for me to come home. Because it was a surprise, I didn't really check with my family whether it was convenient. There was nowhere really for me to be. Everyone was between things, and it was kind of a little bit of a poisoned chalice with respect to how easy it was to fit back in. I wish I'd come up with more of a plan, to set myself up to be able to then go off again or something like that. I have certain mixed feelings about the way in which I arrived. Are you happy? You think it's the right time? It was the right sort of interaction with your parents?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if this changes things for me, but I'm also in the house that I grew up in. So it's incredibly nostalgic. It's actually quite amazing yesterday when I arrived that this is quite a funny story, but it's very appropriate to what I'm talking about. Because everything's so familiar, I'm almost on autopilot in this house. I know where everything is. I always have done. I'm not asking anyone questions as to, where are the plates, or where are the glasses, or how does the shower work, or anything like that. This is the house I grew up in, and my parents have lived here for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. So it's incredibly familiar for me and very nostalgic. And I did live here for a long time, which has meant that things like this could occur. This is so funny. I was chatting to my stepdad yesterday whilst he was making a drink down one end of the kitchen, and I was eating a banana at the same time. And I finished the end of the banana, and without thinking about it, I turned around and put it in the compost bin, which is always in the same place on one of the units in the kitchen. And then once I did that, I realised, you just know where stuff is. And I think that takes a lot of the stress and the strain off because, I'm wasting no energy on finding anything out or trying to get used to my surroundings. I feel completely comfortable immediately.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that is comforting. That is comforting. And obviously, needless to say, friends, spending much time with friends anymore?
I will be. I mean, I've had lots of messages and been, talking to lots of people up in London, down in Brighton, and then all the people that sort of live around here where I grew up. I think it's probably not unique. It's definitely understandable, but lots of the people that I grew up with and my friends, they all live kind of within a 5-mile radius. So I could probably come back for an afternoon and I'd be able to see everyone.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's perfect. Well, we'll definitely keep on checking in how things are going. Have you got a message for any listeners who kind of have been thinking that family and friends and the dissolving of that unit is a reason that's kept them from travelling? Is there anything you'd like to say to those people now, having really gone away for the longest time ever in your life and then come home?
I think what I'd like to say is, in a very positive way, I don't think anywhere near as much changes while you're away as you maybe would think it would. If that, we all want to be there for everything, and there's going to be weddings and births and, parties and, I don't know, construction and what have you. But the town that I'm from, that I grew up in, and my surroundings here have changed very little. And I also, maybe it's important to say as well, no one looks down on you or thinks bad of you for going away and chasing your dreams. And I think that's a really important message to send, because I feel like maybe the feeling really, when you drill down into it, is also one of maybe people feel like they're letting people down if they go travelling, they go away for a really long time. There are certain expectations that are set as a result of maybe the family you grew up in, but also the wider society. And people, for the most part, are very supportive and love the fact that you're going away chasing your dreams. So I would say it's, on the one hand, you might be missing family. That is a real concern and something that is made much easier because of technology. But if you think that you're letting people down and you're not meeting expectations, I don't think that's the case, not from my experience anyway. People are always really excited for you.
That's a beautiful statement you've made there, Adam, and I think one that we can all meditate on. Let's go. There we go, from travelling all over the world to staying in one location and getting permanent residency, to returning home to the family unit, to our friends, and just wondering, what does it all mean? We're here on Tripology Podcast discussing all things travel. Adam?
Hello. Yes, we are. And we introduced a few weeks ago one of our new favourite items on the podcast. Of course, it is rice for breakfast. And very recently, I was treated to a wonderful breakfast. So I'd quite like to share that on our new food item.
Yeah, let's go. Let's play the theme music.
Rice for breakfast. You can't have rice for breakfast. So, mate, I don't know if we've spoken about this specifically, this meal before, but for me, a Turkish breakfast is one of the best meals you could possibly have. So much so that if you put a gun to my head, not that you ever would, let's say if you pinned me down, you'd pin me down. Let's say that if you pinned me down and said, what's your favourite meal in the world? You know, you can only have one meal ever again. What's it going to be? It would be a Turkish breakfast.
Okay, now we've had a Turkish breakfast together at a Turkish restaurant in St. Albert in Alberta in Canada, haven't we?
We have, and it was delicious. How did you feel about it?
I liked it. I thought nice to be taken out by such a handsome young man to have such a beautiful little breakfast.
I said, Alan, don't pin me down in the middle of the restaurant.
Put a gun to my head.
But that's what I'd like to share with you today, mate, because I don't know. You do know this. You do know this. Of course you do. I send you a message every day. But this week, I was on the farm that we met on up in Salmon Arm. Famous on the podcast, of course.
Yeah, the place where we met. The farm with horses, pigs, donkeys, all that jazz.
So, you know, because I was dismantling my life and leaving Canada for an extended period, I thought it really important to go and see all the people that have meant so much to me and had an enormous impact on my time in Canada. So I made the 3-hour journey north up to the farm in Salmon Arm, where I stayed there for the evening and we had a lovely dinner together. And lo and behold, they are currently housing on the farm, because they're such wonderful people, some refugees from the eastern part of Turkey, Kurdistan. There was an earthquake there a little while ago, and a number of refugees have come to Canada, and 2 of those refugees, lovely husband and wife, are now staying with Debbie and Jim in the basement suite that we used to live in.
Little do they know it, those Turkish refugees are in a very special birthplace that we've often described as this podcast's Bethlehem.
Yeah. I mean, it took some translating to get that over to them, but they were quite surprised, and they're really, honestly, lovely people. I mean, the people who own the farm are in their 70s now, so becoming heavily reliant on Google Translate, which seems to be working out really well for them. But through Google Translate, and this was a few weeks ago, they told them, the people on the farm, the people who own the farm, my surrogate grandparents, bless them, told the Turkish couple that I'd spent a lot of time in Turkey, very fortunate to have done so, and that my favourite meal is a Turkish breakfast. So they said back to the owners of the farm, if Adam comes up here at all, we would love to prepare a traditional Turkish breakfast for him. So that's what we did.
Nice. And what time did you arrive? Were you in breakfast time, or did you arrive late in the evening and it was sort of one of those odd things where you have cereal for dinner and you don't quite know what's going on?
I said, rice for breakfast. They said, Adam, you've arrived really late. It's late. We can eat rice for dinner. No, so I arrived in the evening and then we had dinner together. But then it was the following morning, because I stayed the night, that they prepared the breakfast after doing the chores that we miss so dearly.
Yeah.
But no, lovely. We actually, you won't believe this, Alan, but they've actually installed a fully working kitchen down in the basement suite for this couple.
I can't believe it. Oh, that's so lovely of them. I miss those 2 really a lot. So there we go. So are you going to give a review of the Turkish breakfast? Describe what it is for the listener. How does rice for breakfast actually work?
Yeah, so I think we'll talk through the meal. A Turkish breakfast, if you're listening to this and you've never had one, please go and find one. Please search it out. Make sure you're hungry though, because we're talking about sometimes upwards of 10 different dishes. And traditionally, I think it's kahvaltı, I think is the Turkish word for breakfast. But it will involve tea, usually Turkish tea. So you'll be drinking tea. Normally unlimited if you're in a restaurant. It just keeps coming, that stuff. And then bread, always bread. Turkish bread, sometimes the flatbreads, or sometimes they make these things that are quite similar to bagels. What are they called, Alan? Simits, is it? You must know.
Yeah, simits, I think.
Does that ring a bell? And then
do you not know? This is the rice for breakfast.
I do know. I just prefer to be tentative about it. So I don't sound too confident and forthright in my pronunciation. But then we also have an egg dish, and often that will be served in the pan that it's cooked in. And it kind of takes the same shape as shakshuka.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as a sort of Turkish shakshuka.
And then there's also sucuk as well, which is often beef, but it's like a dried sort of Turkish sausage. And then there'll be dried fruits and nuts, usually olives, different spreads, jam. Oh, there's this really interesting thing they eat sometimes for breakfast over in Turkey, and I'm sure it probably extends to the sort of Middle East as well. They'll have like tahine, sesame paste, and they'll mix it with a grape syrup. And it's kind of a little bit savoury, nutty, salty, but then really sort of sweet and fruity. It's really, really good, mate. I absolutely love a Turkish breakfast, and I could sit down for 3 or 4 hours of a morning and just devour the thing.
That's beautiful. So really your top tip for people is go this week and search out a Turkish breakfast. Maybe they can send us a message at tripologypodcast on Instagram, or tripologypodcast at Gmail, or tripologypodcast@gmail.com. Tell us the story about you finding that Turkish breakfast. Do you like it as much as Adam? Is it one of the best things you've ever had?
Yeah, I mean, they did a lovely sort of their take on it. So it normally comes as well with fresh fruit and vegetables. So it might be sort of tomatoes, also some cucumber. There's usually cheese as well that's quite similar to feta in some regards. If you go up into sort of the Turkish mountains, you might even be treated to some local village cheese. But I think the Turkish breakfast, the reason why I love it is because there is something for everyone. It's got it all, mate. It's got it all. So if you've had a Turkish breakfast or you want to try a Turkish breakfast, definitely go and do it. And then send us an email. Tell us all about it. They're just a very communal sort of sharing atmosphere, and bloody delicious, mate.
There you go. What a good item. I like that, mate. Does that conclude rice for breakfast? Is that how the item takes shape? You've given a recommendation. You described your experience of it.
Yeah. And then we'll encourage more and more people to sort it out, and we'll encourage more and more people to seek it out, and look forward to receiving the pictures in the future. I think as well, mate, that when we talk about these food items, they're so much more than just what's on the plate, aren't they? Because a Turkish breakfast for me is sort of a coming together of people. It's obviously a tradition, lots of sharing and that kind of thing. I love the atmosphere that sort of creates. But I'm sitting there with 2 Turkish refugees who have, of course, got an incredible story behind them. And then for me, I'm down in the basement suite where I started my journey in Canada, where I had so many amazing memories with you, of course, and then with the owners of the farm as well, who have formed such an important part of my life. So again, going back to the sort of emotional roller coaster, it was a lot. It was almost overwhelming and delicious at that.
Well, that's it. Mealtime is such a contextual thing. The beauty behind a dish often is the people that we share it with, the setting that we have it in. And I think on Rice for Breakfast, you like to encourage people to step outside their comfort zones a little bit, try new things they've never had before. Because always, Anthony Bourdain, the late great Anthony Bourdain, used to say, always risk the terrible meal, because you might end up with the amazing one. And if anyone has a meal that they really think Adam should try, again, that email address, tripologypodcast@gmail.com. If you're sitting there in the Maldives thinking, oh my goodness, Adam's probably never had this, tell him about it, because he wants to have it. He does want to have it.
I want to eat it all. And of course, likewise, Al, I'm sure you're eating when you're over there.
Oh, yeah.
Feel free to take pictures, post them on the Instagram. We'll do all that kind of stuff, because food's such an important part of life in general, but also certainly a focal point of the reason why we travel. So I'm someone who fancies themselves as... Do you know the word I was going to use there, mate? This is so funny. This is a word that I've ripped to shreds, or a phrasing, shall we say. A phrasing I've ripped to shreds in the past. But you know the old cliche, adventurous eater?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because I think there are certain people that would define themselves as an adventurous eater, or maybe call other people adventurous eaters. But it's a funny little phrase that maybe only exists in the West.
I think there's a lot of phrases. Adventurous eater often is a self-diagnosed term that basically just means you've gone outside of pizzas, hamburgers, hot dogs, and bread and meat. I think that people often say I'm an adventurous eater, but really what they mean is they're just willing to try other foods, which should be the baseline.
Yeah, it makes me chuckle actually to think about people who call themselves adventurous eaters, because we have to assume they're not eating anything that people don't eat. Like if I was like standing next to a cow in a field and grazing on some grass, that would be quite adventurous, because humans don't normally humans don't normally do that. But when you go to outlying regions of China and you maybe have a dish that involves lots of animal organs, if that's what they eat there, I mean, are they also adventurous eaters, or are you just eating what they eat?
Interesting. It's food for thought, Adam. It's definitely food
I like
for
it.
thought. Yeah, it's a little subset of rice for breakfast. Mate, I'm not talking much about where I am because we're saving it for other episodes, but I'm in Sri Lanka at the moment. I'm going to head back to India. And I was just thinking then, the Sri Lankan breakfast, quite interesting, because they've said no to the concept of rice for breakfast, and instead they offer something up called a string hopper, which is like a sort of lacy rice noodles stuck together all cold that you dip in a variety of different curries. And if listeners want to see that, they can head over to our Instagram at tripologypodcast, because I'll post a picture of that breakfast up there. That's how we conclude rice for breakfast. That's how we conclude this episode of Tripology Podcast. I took a flight from the southeast of India to Sri Lanka. I've been sojourning about in what can only be described as a tuk-tuk. I've seen elephants. I've seen elephants. I've seen leopards, Adam. I've seen a mongoose. I've had all kinds of encounters, and I can't wait to share them with you and with the listening audience. And if that's not a cliffhanger, if that hasn't left the audience clinging to the side of a mountain with white-knuckled anticipation, I do not know what will. I'm Alun, I'm covered in flies, there's noise going on in the kitchen, and I want to get off this episode and blast off to next week. You've been Adam, it's ever such a pleasure to have you and talk to you. We'll see you next week. Will you come with me?
I'd love to. One last thing, mate. Get over to patreon.com/tripologypodcast if you want to hear the other section of this episode in the Lost and Found.
We'll see you there.
See you there.
Bye.